You don't become cold overnight. You're slowly anesthetized. At first it feels like comfort, then it becomes distance. Then one day, you realize you're watching other people suffer, and you feel nothing. Not because you're broken, not because you're evil, but because your world got so high that human pain stopped registering as real. And science is finally starting to understand why. Because extreme wealth doesn't just change your lifestyle, it rewires your brain. And in some people, it deletes empathy. Most people believe money is just a tool, something neutral, something that only amplifies who you already are. But that's not how the human brain works. The brain is not a moral machine. It's an adaptive machine. It reshapes itself to survive inside whatever environment you put it in. And no environment in human history has been more unnatural than extreme wealth. When your life becomes frictionless, your brain begins to lose something important: resistance. You stop waiting, you stop needing, you stop negotiating with reality. And slowly, without noticing, your mind starts to expect the world to move around you. Psychologists have a word for this. They call it social insulation. The more layers of comfort you add between yourself and the real world, the less your brain needs to simulate other people's experiences. You don't stand in lines, you don't deal with systems, you don't depend on strangers, you don't feel the small humiliations that keep most people emotionally calibrated. And the brain responds by reallocating resources. In simple terms, it stops practicing empathy. Studies have shown that when people feel powerful, their ability to accurately read emotions in others declines, not because they choose to ignore others, but because their brain literally becomes worse at it. The mental muscles for perspective taking weaken from disuse. It's not cruelty, it's atrophy. And wealth is the most efficient atrophy machine ever invented. When every problem can be solved with money, your brain stops seeing problems as human experiences. They become logistics, numbers, abstractions. A delay isn't someone else's bad day, it's an inconvenience. A crisis isn't someone's life falling apart, it's a disruption. A person isn't a person, they're a variable. And something subtle but dangerous begins to happen. Your emotional world shrinks, not because you have less, but because you're exposed to less. Your brain only feels what it regularly touches. This is why people who live very comfortable lives often feel strangely detached from suffering, even when they're not bad people. Their nervous system is no longer trained on it. And at extreme levels of wealth, this effect doesn't just continue, it accelerates. Because now, you're not just insulated from pain, you're insulated from consequences. Your decisions don't come back to you. Your mistakes don't cost you. Your failures don't follow you home. And the brain learns a terrifying lesson. Other people exist, but their reactions don't matter. This is how entitlement is born. Not as an attitude, but as a neurological pattern. Over time, the brain starts to treat the self as the center of gravity. Other people become background noise. Their emotions become distant signals. Their suffering becomes theoretical. And here's the part nobody likes to talk about. Once your brain adapts to this level of comfort and control, it becomes extremely difficult to reverse. Because empathy isn't just a belief, it's a skill, and skills that aren't used decay. History is full of powerful, wealthy individuals who slowly lost their sense of proportion, not because they were villains at the beginning, but because their environment quietly reshaped what their mind could feel. They didn't wake up one day and decide to stop caring. They just stopped noticing, and when you stop noticing, you stop correcting. That's why extreme wealth often produces people who sound strangely out of touch. Not stupid, not malicious, just disconnected. They talk about suffering like it's a concept, like weather, like something that happens to other categories of people, because to their brain, that's exactly what it is. And this isn't just about billionaires. This process starts much earlier. Every time your life becomes a little more comfortable, a little more buffered, a little more distant from consequences, your brain adjusts. It becomes quieter, narrower, more efficient, and less human. The real danger of wealth is not greed, it's amnesia. You forget what it feels like to need. You forget what it feels like to wait. You forget what it feels like to be small inside a system you don't control. And when you forget that, you don't just lose perspective, you lose empathy, not as a choice, as a function. So the next time someone says money doesn't change people, it only reveals them. Remember this, that's not entirely true. Sometimes it rewires them, and sometimes very quietly. It teaches the brain to stop caring. If this made you uncomfortable, that's a good sign. It means your mind is still awake to things that comfort tries to erase. Pay attention to what your life is slowly teaching your brain to ignore. Pay attention to what stops feeling real. Because the most dangerous changes don't arrive as disasters, they arrive as upgrades. And one day you don't lose your empathy, you just realize and it hasn't been there for a long time. If this video gave you a new way to see the world, or yourself, stay here. There are more things worth noticing before they disappear.